It is South Carolina, Kentucky week, and who better to join us on this week than a man who found a way to rile up the Gamecocks fan base over the summer. Here we are, the week of the game. Our good friend of the show, Nick Roush, Kentucky Sports Radio, one of the best in the business, does a fantastic job in covering the Kentucky Wildcats. Nick, I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. It's great to chat with you once again. How are things?
It's a pleasure to be here. I thought Kentucky might be in a different position at this point in the season, but the offense hasn't quite been what we thought. But there's still a little meat on the bone. Two big games for the Cats to end the year. They go to Louisville, who is all of a sudden a top 10 team in year one under Jeff Brom, and then a big game on the road at South Carolina where they could not only finish 500 in SEC play, which has become kind of the standard of a pretty damn good season that you don't get too often in Lexington. But also you can play spoiler. You know, there's a chance to Mark Stoops, he said there's not he doesn't have anything, there's no beef between him and Shane Beamer. But yeah, I find that hard to believe. So I think him and everybody over there would love to play spoiler and keep Shane Beamer and co out of the postseason.
Nick, I want to get into that more in just a second, but let's look at the Kentucky season to this point, because it really, to your point, Nick, has been fascinating. Kentucky starts out red hot, takes advantage of the non-conference schedule early, maybe a softer front half, wins their first 5 games, gets to 5-0, 2-0. It was really punctuated by that 33-14 win over the Florida Gators to get to 5-0. Ray Davis goes wild, sets up the matchup with Georgia in Athens. Since then, the Dogs dispose of Kentucky, which, listen, nobody's going to hold it against you for losing to Georgia, right? Look what just happened to Ole Miss. But Kentucky now has lost 4 of their last 5. You mentioned, I'm not sure that Devin Leary has been quite the player that we have expected. What's gone so wrong with the Cats over the last 5 weeks? Has it been Leary? Has it been the offense? The passing defense has been an issue, but it's been a tale of 2 seasons. What has it been for Kentucky that's hindered them to this point?
Feels like every time they fix something, there's another leak in the dam, and Mark Stoops is just Chevy Chase trying to plug all the holes. Because you didn't expect this Kentucky football team to be able to run the football, and you look up and Ray Davis is leading the SEC in rushing. Then the passing game, they start to figure things out, and then they can't run the football anymore. So then the passing game, it's not quite as potent when it's 3rd and 5 versus 3rd and 11, right? Like when you get off schedule, you get behind the chains. That's been the problem offensively. They've still been slightly better, but the problem is defensively, they've really struggled as of late, particularly against the pass. And when the defense has finally been able to get stops, the offense hasn't timely responded, right? You get a big stop against Alabama. Here's your opportunity to go down, score, stop the bleeding, rebuild a little momentum. It feels like every time this Kentucky defense does something good, the offense refuses to capitalize. That's really the biggest issue. And then I think early on, what really punched Kentucky fans in the gut, the first time this team got tested, where it was really a tight-knit game, they're up 14-0 against Missouri, fake punt. They throw a 39-yard bomb. The same play that Beamer tried with Kai Kroger a couple weeks ago against Jack State. It's a horrible play. It's a terrible idea. The way that it unfolded for South Carolina is the way that it should unfold 99% of the time. But the one time it worked. Kentucky was in punt safe, and the dude got mossed on a perfect pass from the punter. And it let the air out of the balloon, and they didn't really show their resolve. And I think that's the part that gives you some big picture questions, is how they've been able to handle adversity when the pass defense is getting gashed. You don't really see the defense doing a good job of stop the bleeding. Now, they did that at Mississippi State, where they gave up a 20-play drive and held them to a field goal. But Mississippi State, they stink. They just fired their coach for a reason, right? So I'm not sure how this team right now, they're 2-2 in their toss-up 50-50 games that you kind of consider that going into the year. They've got 2 left, and the only time we've seen them playing close games in the fourth quarter, they either couldn't get a stop and get off the field because they can't pressure the quarterback or they give it big plays, or the offense just refused to show up. Like, hell, I guess it was stops in both Tennessee and Missouri. But how will they react in a Rockus Williams-Brice Stadium if it's a fourth quarter down there at Columbia? I don't know. I really don't know.
And Nick, on a side note, I have to commend you guys because there's been some excruciating losses for Kentucky this season. You mentioned that Mizzou game where Kentucky's in control of the football game. Missouri comes all the way back. And let's give credit to Mizzou. They're a fantastic team this year. I think Eli Drinkwitz honestly should be SEC Coach of the Year. But on that note, I've seen you guys a lot on the timeline doing your post-game shows outside of the stadium. And I commend you because, listen, I felt it this year myself. It's not easy to do a post-game show and talk about a football team that stinks. I get that. Trust me. So I wanted to give you guys some credit. I think the last video, what you say was like, well, it's another loss. That's it. That's the whole video. We're done. We're done. It is what it is. Again, you lose 49-21 to Alabama in your last game, though. But again, I talked about Devin Leary. What's changed for him? Because you look at the numbers, and I mean, they're respectable, right? I think it's 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, just over 2,000 yards. Again, he got off to a really slow start. I think the thing that didn't make a lot of sense was, and he had some high passing yardage numbers, but it was surprising against lesser competition that he wasn't shining more. Mm-hmm. But what's improved in his game the last couple of weeks that you feel like has come along? Is there anything that you look at a matchup like this and you feel like he's ready to play his best football over the next 2 weeks?
Well, where you saw him at his best is it's such a. I mean, I'm hating myself so much for saying this because it's very much a Mark Stoops answer. A lot of it really is the guys around him playing better. The receivers that we had such high expectations for here in the Big Blue Nation, Dane Key and Barryon Brown. Dane Key got off to a very slow start, and he kind of picked that up in October. And that really helped. He had a career high receiving yards. I want to say 7 catches for 108 yards against Tennessee. And that was Leary's best performance to date. And he also got a lot of protection in that game. The problems I think a lot happened is he is deceptively slippery back there in the pocket. And Liam Cohen, I think, has adjusted the way he's calling plays to give him more half-field reads to kind of make things simpler on him to get the ball out of his hands quicker. But when he is entirely under pressure, it's hard to create those explosive plays. It's hard to create those explosive play action plays when you can't run the football. And I think Ray Davis had more rushing yards against Florida than he's had in the last month of the season. So they've got to figure out a way to run the football to help Leary, because I think that some of the limitations that were covered up playing more tempo in the spread, you're seeing now when he's going under center. Sometimes there's a lot of passes that are batted down at the line of scrimmage. And one thing, too, that you might want to keep an eye on, if Kentucky gets an explosive play or if they get a first down, you're probably going to see him go tempo the next play right after that to build some momentum and be efficient on first down, because that's really where this offense has just not been very good. It's just efficiency on first down. A lot of their drive killers are incomplete passes because they're trying to take shots on first down or just getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage by handing the ball up to RD1.
Now, Nick, looking ahead to this weekend, when you look at the South Carolina side of things and look at the Gamecocks as a whole, your overall perception of them as a football team, as I just told you, obviously it's been a rocky year, right? Sitting 4-6 with 2 to play. Bowl eligibility is on the line this weekend and next weekend for South Carolina. Based off your perception of what South Carolina was when you and I spoke over the summer, have you been surprised? Have they been what you've expected? Obviously, Spencer Rattler's taken the league by storm. Xavier Legette, the wide receiver, has been a massive surprise. The defense has been atrocious. Your overall thoughts on what you've seen from Shane Beamer and Gamecocks football in year 3 of his tenure. And also, of course, I know you've seen from afar Shane Beamer making headlines, it feels like, every single week. Thankfully, over the last week or week and a half, there hasn't been anything, which
died down a little bit.
The longest. I think it's the longest I think we've gone without some sort of headline comment, from a chain gang and hot dogs to miserable existence comments to you name it, man. It's been all over the place.
The Gatorade cooler. You need to have a chalkboard behind you.
Yes. Yeah.
7 days since our last Beamer presser.
Yeah. So from an outside perspective, what's been your thoughts on what the South Carolina football season has been at this point?
It's a lot of it is what I expected. I'm going to catch that under 6.5 win total ticket from the beginning of the year. And a lot of it comes down to that offensive line just being as bad as we expected. And we saw it in North Carolina. North Carolina's defense, not good. But they were able to get after Beamer and the Gamecocks and Rattler, excuse me, Leggett has been a pleasant surprise, and it feels like every year there's some South Carolina receiver that's just an ass kicker. I mean, he's a bona fide badass. There's no other way around it. I thought after Juice went down, that was going to be all she wrote. You know, Rattler is playing much better than I ever anticipated. He has thrived with Dow Loggins, but I didn't know who he was going to throw the football to. Right, like there was a weapons problem, but I think with Leggett coming along here and really a lot of South Carolina, the reason where they are is because of the schedule. A lot of the teams that you'd want to play on the road, you're getting at home and you're getting to kind of shell them, right? And that's where Rattler's really been able to put up some exceptional numbers against bad teams at home. Now they've got this is their toughest game at home to date so far. So I'm fascinated how that will work. And in the part that in this matchup really I can't, it just adds a lot of variance to it, right? It's because South Carolina hasn't really been able to protect Rattler, against anybody, but Kentucky hasn't really been able to get after anybody. Now, if he wants to scramble around, they might do a decent job of just keeping him in there and making him throw the football. But Alabama had, I think, the third most sacks allowed in Power 5 football last week, and Kentucky didn't sack Jalen Milroe one time, right? I mean, they might get some pressure on him. Deion Walker provides a great interior push, but the edges haven't been what they thought they were going to be. They haven't been getting home, and then the linebackers have been relatively inconsistent as well. So if Rattler has any sort of time whatsoever, Kentucky's going to have some coverage busts, and you're going to have guys just running down the field wide open. That's going to happen in this game, and so what I want to know is like it feels kind of like a race to 30, and does Kentucky have enough offensive firepower to get to 30 to be able to keep up? Because I think South Carolina is going to be able to score. This Kentucky defense, they've been able to stop the run. South Carolina, they don't even need a try. We know they can't run the football, right? Like it's not going to be a thing. I know they've been able to get some more as of late. So how much is Rattler going to pick them apart? I'm worried it's going to be quite a bit. I haven't seen a number for passing yards, but if you're the gambling type, maybe you might want to take a hard look at the over on Spencer Rattler passing yards for Saturday night.
Nick, that's a great segue in where I wanted to go next, because I was going to say, with all due respect, the Kentucky defense, I think this is going to be a higher scoring game. Speaking of the gambling side of things, 54.5 is the total in Vegas. I love the over there. I think it opened at 52, so it's already shot up almost 3 points. That's where I think this is going to be somewhat of a shootout, like you mentioned. Like I think the winner of this game is going to have to score 30 plus points. I'm looking at like a 34-31, maybe 38-35 game. I mean, do you feel that as well? You see it? I just don't see, like, I look at both defenses, and I'm obviously extremely concerned about South Carolina and slowing down Ray Davis. And I mean, the Gamecocks just have a way of, Devin Leary, he's been okay this year, but he'll have his banner day against the Gamecocks defense. Varian Brown or Dane Key, whoever it is. And then the Kentucky defense, again, you talked about the back end, the pass defense haven't rushed the quarterback effectively. And I mean, Spencer Rattler has shown if he gets time, I mean, Nick, it's to a point for me where if I see Spencer Rattler set his feet and make a throw, in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's a completion. Because more often than not, it has been this year. So are you expecting a high scoring game as well? Or do you see a little bit lower scoring? Or
and that's the genesis of it all, because there's been Kentucky secondary's had such a rotating door this year. You went in feeling pretty good about the play of the safety towards the back end of the season, but you've had injuries, you've had a lot of inconsistencies. I will say the only thing that would sometimes it can be good for an over if they turn it over on the right side of the field. Kentucky's defense does a good job of taking the ball away, right? So that could be the X factor in all of this. Who takes care of the ball better? That can be such a lame cop out for people in our business. Win the turnover battle, but in a way, the way that Kentucky's defense has been so inefficient over the last 5 weeks. I know that there's a hard line. If you're a top 25 defense, if you're a top 25 offense in SP plus, you score on average 42 points per game against this Kentucky team. South Carolina's 30. So is the hard line 25 or is it 30? I think they're going to score a lot. that rotating cast of characters on the defense. They've been banged up. They were out of starting cornerback last week. Another safety's banged up. Like how many guys are going to play that have played significant time this year? Are those guys able to cover anybody? So I'm with you. I would lean over here for a high scoring game. And really I think the other issue I have to get back a couple minutes ago is I kind of trust it isn't this year. It's a Shane Beamer in November has a little bit of juice, there's something about him in November that he gets his teams to rally. And I don't know what the morale of this Kentucky team is. And I don't know how they're going to respond if they get punched in the mouth, because so far this season, it hasn't been great. So of Kentucky's final 2 games, I'm surprisingly more confident against them, against a top 10 team than against South Carolina and Shane Beamer.
Nick, that's a great point you bring up, because I've heard many others talk about that as well, about motivation factors this time of year. And you've got a South Carolina team that, despite being 4-6, is kind of rallying around, hey, we can get to 6, get to a bowl game, get, a bunch of young guys that want to play in a bowl game for the first time or what have you. So there's that excitement and energy. And on the Kentucky side, you've already gotten to 6 wins. You're going to a bowl. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's not quite as much excitement and motivation. Like the major goals, the big goals that were out there for Kentucky in the preseason are no longer there. Although I'd argue, finishing with 2 straight wins and getting to 8 wins would be a solid season, when you take everything into account. Do you worry about the motivation factor and like the excitement to play, and that they'll be able to match South Carolina in that respect?
So I would if it was a different opponent, but that video of Shane Beamer putting the sunglasses on at Kroger Field, I can guarantee you that is getting played over at the facility. I would hope that it's on a loop, right? They have all the different screens around the building. They're probably, I'm going over there later this evening. I'm probably going to be seeing trying to peek around the corner and see if they've got any of the highlights from last year's game, because so much of Stoops' success was built on beating Vanderbilt and the 2 Columbia schools. And the record hasn't been very good against, they've lost 3 in a row to those, right? And there's a Vanderbilt win sprinkled in there, but they've lost to those as of late. So I would hope that there's a little bit of motivation there. I know Mark Stoops, this game means a little bit more to him. It did during the Will Muschamp era, because I think there was a little bit of, hey, why does everybody think this guy's God's gift to being a defense coordinator? My defenses were just as good at Florida State. Why does he get put up on a pedestal? So I think Mark Stoops really was animated again in that Mississippi State game. It felt like he was trying to will his team out to put out their best performance. I think he's going to do it again. I don't know if it's enough, but I think you will at least see them ready for a dogfight down there at Williams-Brice.
To your point, Nick, earlier in the show, I saw the comments that Mark Stoops made about, he was asked about the relationship between he and Beamer. Is there any animosity? You're not buying any of that, right? Like those 2 guys hate each other. There's 100% they loathe each other.
Yeah. Oh, there's very much, and it's funny coming from a Stoops, but I'm sure Stoops thinks of him as a silver spoon kid. But Mark's last name is Stoops, right? So, but they go about their business in completely opposite, different ways. The one thing I will at least appreciate about Beamer, Stoops acts like he doesn't read any of this. All of these coaches read all of it, right? Like Shane and Mark are watching this right now. Hi guys, at least Shane will acknowledge that he does read his press clippings, right? Whereas Stoops yesterday is just, I don't read my phone. I don't know where you would get that from. Dude, you had to go into a press conference and clarify that you weren't talking about Shane Beamer when you were talking about wearing stupid sunglasses. He brought the stupid sunglasses at Kroger Field and celebrated all over your face last year. I think he's going to take that personally. How much does the rest of the team, right? How much pride do they show, and how much do they respond when Rattler goes up and drops a bomb on him? That big play is going to happen. Are they still chomping at the bit to get back at him, or are they going to fall flat on their face in a raucous atmosphere?
Nick, what I think makes this series, or one of the things that makes this series really fun, is this is a series where both fan bases of each respective team, they look at this game every year and say, we should win that game.
Yes.
Look, that's when that's when you start talking about rivalry. Like that's when it becomes really fun. Kentucky fans think they should beat South Carolina on a yearly basis. Gamecock fans, as I'm sure they let you know over the summer, think they should beat Kentucky on a yearly basis. So I ask you this, what is the confidence level of Big Blue Nation entering this football game?
Ooh. Oh. It's not great checking the boards. Our
Because
message board right
I
now.
would imagine Kentucky fans did have this chalked up as a W in the preseason, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Most of them.
And a lot of it is just more on the way that Kentucky's lost this year is very anti-Stoops like. When in doubt, they were going to kick your ass up front, beat you up. They might lose because they weren't as explosive, but the way Kentucky's lost, we got so used to going down in a familiar fashion that now that things are a little different, you're worried that, oh gosh, has he lost the team? Has he lost the program? But I would still think that it's about a 5.5, 6, where, hey, it's still South Carolina. I know it's a road game and I know we're reeling, but they're 4-6. You should go down there and beat this team. Even though people have a negative opinion of Spencer Rattler, they aren't looking at his numbers to say they've been good. So I think there's a relative amount of confidence. Where I've seen it really dip, and it's shameful, is all the folks are already counting Louisville as a loss. Like, come on, did they play in the ACC? You and I both know that's not real football they play over there.
Indeed. Hopefully, Kentucky and South Carolina can show that next weekend when they play their respective rivals.
Exactly.
Nick, this is a lot of fun. When you look at this game, I'm just thinking here, admittedly, I have not locked in, Nick, a prediction yet or anything like that. But
yeah.
I look on paper. I'll tell you right now, I think Kentucky, top to bottom, is a better football team than South Carolina still right now. Even though they've lost 4 of the last 5, even the Gamecocks have won 2 in a row. Granted, it was against Jacksonville State and Vandy, whatever.
Yeah.
I think Kentucky's a better football team top to bottom. But you and I both know this is when Beamer and company, this is when they turn it on, right? We saw it last year against Tennessee and Clemson. We saw it in year 1 when they beat Florida and Auburn down the stretch. You talked about that night game atmosphere at Williams-Brice Stadium. Darude's going to be there doing a pregame concert and everything. They're pulling out all the stops for Kentucky, right? You mentioned the only other raucous atmosphere truly that Kentucky's played in. I can't really count Starkville as like a truly hostile environment. It was Athens, and Georgia took them to the woodshed. Granted, that's Georgia. But, I mean,
right.
You have any sort of concerns, reservations, what have you, that environment could throw Kentucky off? Granted, Nick, I will say this to you and Big Blue Nation, South Carolina has lost 1 SEC home night game in the Shane Beamer era. It was to Kentucky in 2021. So, I mean, the Cats have done it before, right? They've done it before. So, your thoughts on just the overall atmosphere and environment?
Hey, first and foremost, it is one of the more underrated, I think, in the Southeastern Conference. As much as you hate it or love Sandstorm, it's cool. I don't know what Darude's going to add to it when he shows up and just pushes the button and it plays his music or whatever. But I'm sure the folks will be fired up. Where it really could become an issue, and you saw it a little bit in Mississippi State, is Liam Cohen's up in the booth and he runs this pro-style system, and it could operationally getting plays in has been a problem at times. I could see that being the case down here in South Carolina, where they have to burn a random timeout. They could come back to bite them, right? Or they get a delay of game or something along those lines, where operationally it could be a problem. And I also, to your point about November Beamer, could see where things get a little hairy in a special teams department. I don't know what it is, but he's always got some special teams something. And in the heat of the moment, the line of fire, especially if this turns into a shootout, I could see Kentucky just being so laser focused on keeping up in this shootout that they let some stupid special teams thing happen. And right now, that their punting game, it's been bad. They got a decent field goal kicker that they really haven't had to use this year, oddly enough. It's just go for it or you're out of field goal rate. They haven't used them a ton, but the punting game hasn't been great. And also down at Mississippi State, I think the kickoff team tried to get in a fight every single time down the field. So, you could see some sort of dumb penalty, 15-yard penalty. And that's where that and the explosive Rattler plays, like I think are the biggest concerns going into this, is special team snafus where it just tilts so heavily in favor of South Carolina in the special teams department. And then I have a lot of confidence that Rattler's going to get explosives, and I don't I don't know how much I trust Kentucky's offense to be able to keep up with it at this point. I think they can if Ray Davis is rocking and rolling, but that just hasn't been the case as of late.
Jubilation and trash talking for the winner, heartache and misery for the loser, Nick Roush. That's what awaits the Gamecocks and Wildcats on Saturday. Nick, last thing before we get you out of here, of course, we got to talk basketball, man. Basketball is officially underway on the date in which we're speaking. Kansas and Kentucky doing battle tonight. That's a fun one. Outlook on the Wildcats this year. Obviously, it's a really, really big year for John Calipari, and there's some pressure on him to make a deep postseason run. Do you think they have the team to meet those expectations?
They do if they get their front court in order. Right now, they've got 3 7-footers sitting on the bench. One of them's from Croatia, who I have very low expectations for, even if he does get eligible. The other 2 are dealing with foot injuries. Aaron Bradshaw is a projected lottery pick if he gets his affairs in order. Because that's really, I mean, they're starting a 6'8" guy who played small forward last year at West Virginia. He's playing center right now. But outside of that, I think it's not necessarily the worst thing at the start of the year because it's forcing Kentucky to play 5 out with a lot of really talented guards. Because, well, let's be real, this is college basketball is a guard-oriented game that you can only go as far in the NCAA tournament as your guards will take you, and they have some very talented guards. I mean, as sad as it may be, a lot of John Calipari is if he's got the best point guard on the floor, he's gonna win. I mean that's how it works. And what's right now they've got 2 ball handlers that I think are 2 of their best. They're better than any point guard he started since 2020 when they had Emmanuel Quickley, Tyrese Maxey in the same backcourt. So between Robert Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, DJ Wagner, what's nice about him is usually you get these freshmen that come in, John Walls and De'Aaron Foxes that really go a million miles an hour and they're running the lane and you just crazy stuff happens, right? They're taking bad shots, they're forcing stuff. This is such a good passing team that they're playing like they're not freshmen right away. Now, there are some slow starts. There's going to be plenty of that they have to go through. But the normal bad shot, stupid pass, just complete doy freshman stuff, they aren't having as much of that. And so that's why I think this is looking a lot more like a vintage John Calipari team. Once Edwards gets going, he's projected as the first overall draft pick by a lot of folks. Once he gets going and plays with some physicality inside, he's a 6'8" guy who can shoot threes, right? And Lefty handles the ball well, runs the floor. He could be an absolute dog for them. So I think ultimately this is you got to get right this year, John Calipari. And that means win the SEC tournament, go to a Final Four. I don't know what people are saying if it's short of that, but I also think that's very realistic expectation, particularly winning the SEC tournament. You know, the SEC has gotten a lot deeper, so winning the regular season has become more of a challenge. You're going to go to the road and lose to, Alabama, Arkansas. You can drop one to South Carolina, Florida. You name it. I mean, that happens in this league now. There's a lot. The floor has really been raised. But the SEC tournament, when the best are all together and you need to put your best 3 or 4 games together, I think Kentucky's going to get back into that form this fall if they can get their front court in order.
Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio. Those guys at KSR do a fantastic job covering the Wildcats. Nick, I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Let's definitely do this again soon. Maybe we can collab on some basketball stuff. It's crazy to think conference play it's not that far off. At a month and a half, we're talking conference basketball action. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Good.
I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Let's chat again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Can't wait to get to Columbia and do some people watching at Pearls. Always a good time. Always a good time there.
Be careful, my friend. I appreciate it.